is Rory Yakubov. I'm a math teacher in New Jersey, and I'm going to show you today some of my tips and tricks for making an easy worksheet and how to tie it along with any Quizlet study set that you might make or maybe you find from the Quizlet website. Let's take a look. So first I want to show you what a worksheet might look like, something pretty standard. This is one of the worksheets that I might assign to my students, whether it's in person or virtually. I could have another note sheet with more text, and maybe I have some other information here on more of a poster type page that they might have and things like that. So I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how you can make some things look just like this on your own and give them to your students. So the first thing you're going to do is go into PowerPoint. I am a big fan of PowerPoint because you just have so much control over where everything goes. I tend not to make any of my teaching documents in Word because Word is very constricting and you have to always change the settings of everything for aligning and just going into the perfect place that you want. So I'm going to show you exactly what to do. When you go into PowerPoint, the default settings are, of course, to give you this kind of screen. I always go ahead, I select everything, and I just simply delete it. I go over to Design. I go to Slide Size. I change to 4x3 instead of 16x9, which is going to be more of the size of a paper. I'm going to click Maximize. I'm also going to go to Slide Size, Customize Slide Size, and change that to Portrait so that I can get my regular page looking screen. And so now this looks like it would be one of my Word documents. I've taken that PowerPoint slide and I've rotated it to portrait mode. So that's already a big win and a success. Something else that I do in order to get my page completely lined up the way I want it to be is I go over to View and I click on all of my tools here. So I want to see my ruler at the top and the side. I want to see all of my grid lines and I want to see my guides. That way I know where the center of my page is horizontally, where it is vertically. I can map out the things that I want and I know how everything is going to be perfectly laid out. Of course, this is the design after the margins are already set. So this is already going to be an inch shorter lengthwise and height-wise. So it's already taking off the margins. So this is all of my true workable space. So a couple tips that I'm going to show you is something as simple as putting in a title for our worksheet. So let's say I was doing order of operations. And usually we don't really want to use the fonts that we're just given. We want to use some fun fonts. So I usually download a ton of fonts from different websites. There's lots of free fonts that you can use. Some of my favorite fonts are on Teachers Pay Teachers or dafont.com or 1001fonts.com. So when you find a font that you super love, I love this font. This is one of my favorite fonts for sure. It's kind of like a funky kid-looking drawing. You're going to want to make that font obviously as big as you can, but a way if I wanted to really make sure it was centered to my page is I can extend the text box to the left and right hand sides of my page and then simply use my grid for putting it in the middle. So that's just an easy way to get it, of course, centered. And then let's say I wanted to add in some problems. So I could go ahead and click on text box again, type in, let's say 4 plus 3, I was putting -5. Okay, so let's say I have this really easy problem and I don't like the way the font looks, so I may choose that same font, and of course I can adjust my size. And let's say that's the problem that I want to keep, a super or simplifying problem. But I want to, let's say, make sure that all of my problems line up nicely. Well, Control D, if you select the item and you click Control D, that's a really fast way for you to go ahead and copy paste. And I might say, you know what? I want it to line up on the second side of my page. And notice the red guidelines show you that it is definitely in line. And this guideline here in the middle shows me that it's definitely on the right-hand side of my page. So you can imagine that if I duplicate both, Control D, and I line them up, you can see the guidelines are going to help me perfectly space things out. Now, what's really nice about PowerPoint too is I just click Control D from that setting and placed it here. If I now just click Control D again and again and again, it's going to auto duplicate and continue to copy the problems right along the bottom of the page in that same spacing, which is really amazing. If you have some problems that aren't spaced out the way you want them to be, like let's say I copy and paste these 3 problems here and they're a little not in the right order, You can copy all of the problems. So you can see I highlighted all 3. You can go over to shape format. And when you click align, there's so many options here for align. You can align them all to the top, so that'll set them to the top of the highest one, which they already are. But I can also click align and distribute horizontally. And if I click distribute horizontally, look what happens. They perfectly distribute horizontally, and so now they're spaced out. So if you don't want 2 problems per column, you want 3 problems per column, you want them evenly spaced out, that is something really easy to do. Something else that I absolutely love about making worksheets look the way that I want them to look is creating bubble letters. And sometimes I want my students to do color coding, so I will find a font that I love, and usually the fonts that I love, they're not in bubble letter form, they're just a pretty bold, solid form. So let's say I take this phrase PEMDAS, I make it really big at the bottom just as a reminder for my students, and I say, you know what, I would love for it to be bubble letters because I would love for my students to color some things in. So what I can easily do is go back to shape format, and instead of shape fill, shape outline, which we're so used to using, I'm going to head over to text fill. So I'm actually going to fill in the letters white, and then I'm going to make the text outline, which doesn't change the box, it's only the outline of the letters, to black. And when I do that, that font instantly becomes a bubble letter font. Usually I want my text outline to be a little deeper, so I'm going to go to weight, I'm going to adjust it to maybe 2 1/4 or 1/3. Oh, the 1/3 looks great, the 3-point scale looks great, and that's exactly where I want it to be, let's say. And of course, I can always drag out my box to either end of the page and then click center. And that way I know that text is perfectly centered to my page. And so that's a pretty easy thing for me to be able to do. Another trick for creating the slides, the kind of things that you want rather on your grid, is to easily create a number line or a graph. So if I wanted to create a really easy number line, what I do is I go into shapes and I click the line tool. And I'm just going to draw a really basic line. I'm going to double click on it so that I can change its color to black. I'm going to change the setting so that it's a darker line. And also, if you double click on it and you notice that the vertical alignment is at 0, the height is 0, that means it is perfectly horizontal. So if you were making a line and you're like, I think that's definitely crooked, if you double click on it and you change the height and you see it's at 0.22, it means it's definitely not horizontal. So you can just arrow down until it gets to 0, and then it's perfectly good to go. So then what we would do is we would go and add in another shape. I'm just using the line segment tool here. I'm going to make that black. And again, if I double click on it, if I see it's 0 here for my width, then I know it's perfectly vertical. And I'm going to go ahead and put a line segment there and then just click Control D a bunch of times. And what this is actually going to create is a number line. Now you might be like, I want to drag each one of those line segments to make my line, my number line. But all I have to do is highlight all of those segments, go back into shape format, go to align them all to the top. So watch what's about to happen. All of those segments are going to go to the very top of the top icon that I have selected. Boom. Then I'm going to say, you know what? Well, obviously that's pretty skinny. I'm going to move the last one to the end. I'm going to just actually re-highlight them all just to make sure they're still aligned to the very top, which it looks good. And now I'm going to go to that distribute horizontally. And what this is going to do is it's going to distribute everything I have highlighted from the leftmost point to the rightmost point and distribute it perfectly like this. And now I have a beautiful, beautiful number line. The last thing I'm going to show you, something really easy to create today, is creating any coordinate plane. So you're going to go ahead, you're going to go to Insert Table, and I'm going to, let's say, make a 10 by 10 grid table. Now, obviously that looks pretty messy, that's not what we want. While it's highlighted, I'm going to turn it into just a basic grid. I'm also going to, while it's highlighted, make sure that my layout for the height and the width is identical. So these two numbers need to be the same. So if I make the height and the width both 0.5, now I have this perfect grid. And you might say, you know what, that grid is exactly what I need for my document. I don't need to change it, but we can always go ahead and put axes in now. So imagine you went back to your line segment tool, or line tool rather. You draw a line. I'm going to make that, again, the weight much bigger. I now have an x-axis. I'm going to Control D, and I'm going to put that where my y-axis should be. I'm going to go ahead and take off my grid line so you can see this even better. And look at that, I have a beautiful coordinate plane, an x-axis, a y-axis. I can always go ahead and add a text box to label my x-axis, label my y-axis, or anything that I could possibly need. And these are really all the starters for making any kind of worksheet, or especially a math worksheet, regardless of the grade or age or type of math you're teaching. You definitely need these tools in whatever you're making. I hope these tips were helpful for you. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.